Good morning. Today is Thursday, and we are into July, aren't we? And we might be into July, but we're still into Exodus. And it looks like even when we get into, we left June, in June we're in Exodus, and now in July. Let's hope it's not 40 years like they were in the wilderness. We're reading chapter 19 of Exodus in our daily devotions. So I want to just focus on 8 verses. Tomorrow we'll read the rest of the chapter, verse 9 through 25. But let's read 1 through 8. On the first day of the 3rd month, after the Israelites left Egypt, so first day of the 3rd month, on that very day they came to the desert of Sinai. And after they set out from Rephidim, they entered the desert of Sinai, and Israel camped there in the desert in front of the mountain. That's the sacred mountain, Mount Sinai. By the way, where it says desert, the word desert means not sandy dunes, 40 years. I thought that as a kid. The word there actually means wilderness with grazing possibilities for the cattle, but unsettled country. Then Moses went up to God, and the Lord called to him from the mountain and said, "This is what you are to say to the descendants of Jacob, and what you are to tell the people of Israel. You yourselves have seen what I did to Egypt, and how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now, if you obey me fully and keep my covenant, then out of all the nations you will be my treasured possession. Although the whole earth is mine, you will be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words you are to speak to the Israelites." So Moses went back and summoned the elders of the people and set before them all the words the Lord had commanded him to speak. The people all responded, "We will do everything the Lord has said." So Moses brought their answer back to the Lord. So here we have the beginning of a block of teaching that begins in the 3rd verse of chapter 19 and actually goes through all of Leviticus and into Numbers. Let's see, it stops at around Numbers chapter 10. It's a huge block of teaching, as we're going to see, at least in Exodus. And then after that in Numbers, we have some movement of the people, some historical narrative. So what does that tell us? It really leaves about 38 years unrecorded of their wanderings in the wilderness. In other words, God focuses on just what we need to know, lots on the giving of his commandments, and then some of their movements, as we've already heard, read where they went and it was bitter water at Marah, and when they went to Elim and there was nice food there for them. So we have some of that, but most of it is teaching. What's happening those other 38 years? Well, it's like the first 30 years of Jesus' life. What do we know? Nothing. We know he was born. We know he went to Egypt to escape persecution by Herod. We know what he was doing at 12 years old, one little incident in the temple when the parents lost him and found him. And what did he do from 12 to 30? We don't know. We don't need to know. So here's a good rule. God doesn't tell us everything we want to know. In the Bible, he tells us what we need to know. So now, notice this is the beginning of the covenant. God is making a covenant with the people. It's the Old Testament covenant. Old Testament, Old Covenant, the covenant with Moses and Israel. And he begins here in verse 5. You'll notice, and it says, "Now if you obey me fully and keep my covenant, then out of all the nations you will be my treasured possession." So that was typical of the covenants that were made in that day between a ruler and a people, between a king and a kingdom. If you do this, I will do that. If you don't do that, I will not do as I promised. That was a covenant. And here's the Old Testament. The Old Covenant, if you will do everything I tell you, then you will be my special people, and you'll be a kingdom of priests, a holy nation to me. Now, that word holy nation means separated, set apart from other nations. Holy in the Bible, the original meaning is just separated. God's people are a separated people. The true church is a holy church, separated that way. Then the word began to also have moral connotations, as in pure rather than impure, holy and right rather than unrighteousness and unholy. You get it? So it began with, I've separated you. There's all these other nations, and then there's you. And by the way, that's the way the world, God looks at the world today. There's all the nations of the world, and then there's the church. We are in the world, but we're not of the world. There's the church amidst, and it's invisible because there's Christians in China, there's Christians in Africa, there's Christians everywhere. No one's seen all the believers together at one time. Ooh, that'll be a meeting. But we are separated from the world. And God has a special interest because we have been born again into his family. More about that later. And now this key verse, when Moses came back down, and the sequence here is not to be taken literally. He goes back and forth. We're not sure when they said certain things. Maybe it was a summary of when he got fully done with it. But nevertheless, when he came down this first time, he told them what God had said, and the people went, we are down for that. Everything God says, we will do. Oh, how little they knew. They, of course, were going to break all the commandments right after they got them. Real quick, as we're going to learn later. They're going to make a graven idol. They're going to disobey them all. It's just, so it goes to show that the initial human instinct is we make vows. Okay, God, I have really messed up, but now, ahora, starting today, woo, wait till you see. I'm going to be just so perfect. Christianity is not about promise keeping or vow making. It's about faith. But the law had to come to prepare us. Why? It had to show us how weak we were. The people did what we've done. You haven't done that? You haven't turned over a new leaf? Oh, I've turned over so many new leaves. Prospect Park, Central Park together will not outdo my new leaves. But broke them all. How about you? So God uses that to show us we need help from the inside. And now this is going to point out the whole failure of this covenant. The whole failure of the law is that the law could not change anybody on the inside, and that's where my problem is. My problem is Jim Cymbala's heart. That's my problem. Out of the heart comes all kinds of nasty stuff. And the law is insufficient, as we're going to read in Hebrews. I'll make a new covenant. Why? The old covenant didn't change anyone. You can get all the laws you want. That's why legalistic churches never produce strong Christians. Why? Because, as I learned a long time ago, behind every legalist, there's a lawless person. The more they pound law, you got to obey. We're going to put you on disciplina. We're going to put you in discipline. You're going to have to sit in the back of the church for 6 months. The more they do that, it doesn't change one person. But when Jesus comes, he gives us a new heart and he puts a new spirit within us. Let's thank God that we don't live under the law. Our leader is not Moses. Our leader is Jesus Christ.